Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
From her rich and fertile valleys to the shores of her icy seas, from her fields and farms and shellfish beds and her many nurseries, for the finest of her flavor, for the freshest by far, choose the things Alaskans bring to the market where you are. Products that we're proud to call our own, and it's all Alaska grown.
The National Weather Service.
Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller, and you have turned into your Alaska Weather Show for this evening. Tonight is June 14th, 2016, and we'll be taking you through weather across the region. As always, you can keep up to date with us on our website at www.arh.noaa.gov. That stands for Alaska Regional Headquarters. Our weather info line is 24/7, and that is 1-800-472-0391. Our information website for the regional outlook is weather.gov/Alaska, and you can get to the Fairbanks, Juneau, and Anchorage office from there. Facebook, you can use NWS Alaska to find all three offices as well. And on Twitter, at NWS Alaska, use the hashtag AKwx, and that'll give you a regional perspective of what's going on in the weather world across Alaska. And our show and other segments are on YouTube. Again, use the hashtag AKwxTV. So let's jump in tonight. We have a few headlines to talk about, and probably number one is going to be our fire potential that we're seeing over the next couple days. As you've probably noticed if you live in south central or the interior portion of the state, it's been rather warm and starting to get quite windy in places like Seward, Valdez, any valley that favors a northwest to southeast orientation or north to south orientation for that matter. So some of those places have started to get rather warm, rather gusty. And with that, we will see the fuels, the fire fuels that we talk about at the office. We'll start to see those dry out a little bit. And so therefore, around the Matanuska Valley, we do have increased fire danger up to the high level. Also through the Copper River Basin. Again, it follows right there where those northwest winds would track through the Copper River Basin. And so there's high danger there as well. Up along the Brooks Range in the interior portion of the state, a fairly wide swath of high danger, and then a small pocket of extreme danger there up in the northeastern portion of the state, right in the center there. So again, with that, we do expect fairly elevated high fire danger through the next couple days. These hot conditions will persist. It's only going to get warmer for the next several days. And also our office has worked in coordination with the Anchorage Fire Department, who asked us to put out a high fire danger alert for the Anchorage, Eagle River, and local areas for that. So you can find that information on our website if you're interested in what the fire status is for those local areas. Taking a look at our satellite now, let's dive in and see exactly what's going on. High pressure is starting to build over southwest Alaska, and that is what's bringing us these clearing skies, the drier conditions, and the abundant sunshine for much of the state, including another area of high pressure up here over the northeastern portion of the state. So those are kind of working in tandem there to really start to bring some drying and clear conditions for much of the state. There is a weak trough access, we'll talk about that a little bit later, in the mid-levels, and that's really helping to push some of this air from north to south as that high pressure builds in and pushes behind this area of lower pressure. And so with that, that's why we have those gusty winds through the gaps like Whittier, Valdez, and Seward. Out over the Aleutians and out towards the Alaska Peninsula, we do have an occluded front that is starting to fall apart, but it looks fairly impressive here on satellite. Let's go ahead and loop that one more time. And as you can see here, the spinning is right out here, a weakening area of low pressure, but nonetheless, this front will bring some rain to areas of the eastern Aleutians and over towards Dutch Harbor and eventually towards Cold Bay and Sand Point. Out towards southeast Alaska, some general mid-level and lower-level clouds up towards the northern portions, but down towards the central portion of southeast Alaska, it has been a fairly nice day with abundant sunshine for those folks as well. Taking a look at our visible loop now, Again, there you can see the abundant sunshine for southeast Alaska. A few thunderstorms have fired over into southwestern portion of Canada, and then up towards the central portion of the state we just have a few isolated showers that you can see there as the cumulus clouds look a little bit more spotted on the map there, and that is a reflection of the instability and the cumulus clouds generally forming on the terrain. Here's our front out over southwest portion of the Bering, and there it starts to stretch out and bringing some rain again to the eastern Aleutians. Some showers on the backside of that as we see those open cell cumulus clouds there, and expect showers to continue for western Aleutians. And we will be watching this area up here, just these higher clouds. We'll talk about that as we step through the slides here, looking at today's weather. So again, right along the Alcan border, we do see some light rain just near Eagle and Northway, a few isolated showers over the central portion of the state, and really that's about it as far as precipitation across the state this afternoon. There was some light rain reported at Dutch associated with this front, but other than that, we've seen mostly clear and dry conditions for much of the state. We do have some isolated thunderstorms off into the western portions of the Yukon territories there, and those are going to probably remain over in that area for this afternoon. We'll keep an eye on them as they migrate a little bit further to the west tomorrow, courtesy of this weak area of low pressure here. And our area of high pressure up over the Arctic there at 1024 is going to yield to this lower pressure in this area of rain and snow that's going to push along the Bering Sea coast, or excuse me, the Beaufort Sea coast. And with that, we do expect deteriorating conditions there as we go through the overnight hours. So taking a look at that now, that's really going to be our focus for weather for the overnight along the Arctic coast there. We do see an area of low pressure will develop at 1,015 millibars, and as it does so, the rain will become a little bit more widespread. We could see some snow just clip the northwestern portions of the coastline there, but for the most part it should remain rain, and again fairly fast moving, so not expecting a lot in the way of accumulation. For much of the state, though, we will remain in a clear, dry pattern through the overnight hours with high pressure in control over Bristol Bay. We do expect some fog, though, to develop in marine stratus to continue to push in to Bristol Bay. We have some marine stratus hanging offshore right now, and that should start to make its way inland as this area of high pressure really takes charge overnight tonight. And so with that, expect some fog in the King Salmon and Dillingham areas. For southeast Alaska, you see this area of weak lower pressure. It's called a trough in the mid-levels. We call it low pressure at the surface. But with that, we do have some possibilities, some showers in the Chilkoot and Yakutat area. But otherwise, still just partly cloudy conditions for much of southeast Alaska. And then our area of low pressure out there with the weakening front there near Dutch Harbor. Taking a look at Wednesday now, we can see that area of low pressure continues to weaken and just some isolated rain showers as that thing continues to fall apart. The weak area of low pressure is up towards, the trough is up towards the Pribilof Islands by tomorrow afternoon. A new area of low pressure is going to be what we're going to be focusing on towards the end of the week and into the weekend. This is going to be the weather maker as we start to go into the latter half of the week and into the weekend, because it will connect with this area of low pressure, and they together will start to merge towards the southwest portion of the state and eventually into south central. For Wednesday, we do expect that area of lower pressure that developed in the overnight hours to move quickly off to the east. Just some pockets of snow showers behind it. These should be very isolated in nature, not expecting anything widespread at all as a new area of high pressure starts to move in there. And otherwise, just some general mid-clouds for much of the state, but mostly clear skies once again for south central and southwest Alaska on Wednesday. And again, those warmer temperatures making for increased fire danger and increased snow melt and river runoff. So be advised of that as well. Off into the southeast portion of the state, again, there's those thunderstorms that could just clip Chilkoot and White Pass. We only expect them to be up in the northern portion of the southeast, and we do expect them to remain in the higher elevations. So just an outside chance there, and otherwise we should see just isolated showers as the majority of the precipitation is still off south of our state into the Canadian territories. Then on into Thursday, there's where that area of low pressure starts to sync up with this area over the Bering Sea. And with that, we do expect the rain to become a little bit more moderate in nature, especially on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. And it starts to spread a little bit closer to southwest Alaska. So we do expect a little bit more lower pressure to develop over southwest. And with that, the possibility of some showers. These don't look to be thunderstorms at this time. We will be watching that over the next couple days. But for now, we're just anticipating showers along the Alaska range. They could be kind of heavy in nature if you are traveling through the passes up there. And over southern Alaska and southeast Alaska, we do expect one more day of really nice weather with warmer temperatures even than Wednesday, and continued clear skies for much of the area all the way down into southeast Alaska. Up over the Arctic coast, our area of lower pressure did clear through, and now high pressure is in charge, so not expecting much in the way of hazards up there at all. Taking a look at our temperatures this afternoon, quite warm across the region. We saw many 60s, low 60s, 64 degrees there in Juneau, 62 degrees in Klawock, and it was 53 degrees there in Yakutat, where the cloud cover was a little bit more abundant and the waters had a little bit more influence. 72 degrees at Valdez and 61 degrees at Middleton Island. 67 with northwest flow up near Galcana, and a couple of our warmer spots, 73 degrees there at Seward. Those northwest winds really come down, 70 degrees. Those northwest winds come down and really help to warm conditions in the coastal regions and keep the sea breezes more or less at bay. Taking a look over the interior portion of the state and up towards the Brooks Range now, you can see not actually as warm up there as it is over southern Alaska, with upper 50s and low 60s being the predominant high temperature this afternoon at 4 o'clock. And then along the Arctic coast, we did see temperatures in the mid 30s to upper 30s, even some low to mid 40s as you get a little bit farther towards Point Lay. Out towards the Seward Peninsula, Nome came in at 52 degrees, and a few mid 50s snuck in there as well, with some sunshine making it in this afternoon. Then over towards southwest Alaska, we saw much of the area in the mid-50s, except right there where the sunny skies and the northwest flow were dominant. Iliamna got to 63, Dillingham was 60, and King Salmon was 65 degrees this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Out over the Alaska Peninsula, temperatures generally in the mid to low 50s. Taking a look at tonight's low temperatures, again, it's going to be a relatively clear night across the area. So with that, you have the warm afternoons, but then it's dry, and so you can radiate out all of your energy during the overnight hours, and so we cool things off pretty quickly, especially how dry it is out there. The dew points are very low, and that helps the temperature to really bottom out during the overnight hours. So with that, fairly cool temperatures, low 50s to upper 40s for southeast Alaska. Generally, we'll see low to mid 40s for much of the Copper River Basin and the Susitna Valley, right around 50 along the coastline there with our warmest conditions, and then up towards the interior portion of the state, generally in the mid to upper 40s, and it's not until you get north of the Brooks Range that you see lows down into the 30s. Towards southwest Alaska, where we have those foggy conditions that should develop overnight, we will keep a little bit more warm temperatures in there, so upper 40s for those locations, and then out over the Alaska Peninsula, expect mid to upper 40s. And for tomorrow's high temperatures, again, another, I won't say scorcher because that might be reserved for the southwestern portion of the lower 48, but it is going to be a very hot day by Alaska standards. And with that, we do expect a widespread area of mid to upper 70s through southwest Alaska. Even much of south central will be in the 70s to maybe even 80 degrees near Seward and Valdez, and then towards southeast Alaska, mid to upper 60s and even some low to mid 70s there as well. Really, it'll just depend on the winds and the water. How close you are to the water will really dictate our temperatures in this clear and sunny pattern. Out over the Aleutians, we do expect mid 50s and even some upper 40s as we look out further to the west. For our flying weather now, we do see some pockets of MVFR conditions, and this is mainly associated with that lower area of pressure, that trough that we saw sliding through there. This should be mainly confined to the higher passes there where we see some MVFR conditions. And then out over the Bering where we saw that front, we do have some MVFR and IFR conditions expected for tomorrow morning. That area of IFR conditions is expected because of that developing low pressure. Taking a look in tomorrow afternoon now, our MVFR conditions will be confined even further to the southeast over southeast Alaska. Up over the northern portion of the state, really just along the coast, we expect MVFR unless you're just northeast of the Brooks Range there, a small pocket of IFR in the afternoon, and then continued MVFR and IFR associated with our front over the Bering Sea. Anaktuvik Pass looking to be VFR, and actually all of the passes are going to be visual flight rules. The only one that I want to draw your attention to is going to be not rainy or windy. Those are both visual flight rules. Not Isabel, not Mentasta. Tanita is also going to be VFR. Portage will be VFR. Chilkoot and White are the ones that I want to talk about the possibility of just those isolated thunderstorms that we mentioned before. Those should really be confined to the northeastern portion of southeast Alaska. So only in those areas would we expect even any potential for thunder whatsoever. So all VFR in the passes. As we look at our freezing levels, again, fairly high levels across much of the state. 12,000 feet here, surging northward behind that frontal system. Over much of the state, we have freezing levels with these warm temperatures up around 8,000 feet and even up towards the Brooks Range, 6,000 feet. A few pockets of slightly lower near where that system of lower pressure is going to develop, and that's near 2,000 feet. And then out over the Bering Sea, we do expect a pocket of slightly lower, relatively lower freezing levels between 6,000 and 8,000 feet. And now looking at tomorrow's icing, we do have some isolated pockets with those showers above 10,000 feet. and light isolated above 6,000 feet out over the western portion of the Bering Sea there. There is a pocket associated well north of the northern portion of the state, and then just mentioning again those isolated thunderstorms possibly near Chilkoot and White. So taking a look at our jet stream, we do see it coming in from the west, moving to the east. Much of the energy is going to be well south of the state, supporting this trough of lower pressure that's making for a fairly persistent pattern for the west coast, where they've been in a fairly wet and cool pattern for much of those areas with 100 knots coming out of the southwest. But for our area, 95 knots supporting this area of lower pressure in the upper levels, coming west and then driving up over Canada and off into the northeastern portion of our map there. Fairly calm conditions over much of the state. Taking a look at our 9,000-foot winds now. Really, again, the stronger winds are south and down into the North Pacific. We do have counterclockwise flow coming around this area of low pressure at about 25 to 30 knots. And then out over the state, again, fairly light conditions for the most part with high pressure in charge. We do want to note those northwest winds. They do start to get a little stronger as they go through some of those passes. So 25 knots at 9,000 feet, and then a 35 knots out of the west right along the Brooks Range there up over the northeastern portion of the state. Similar conditions expected for 3,000-foot winds, generally westerly flow across the interior and northern portion of the state, and then those northwest gustier winds for the Gulf Coast there. And our low pressure system will continue to have about 20 knots flowing out of the southwest, becoming northeast and east, 25 knots tomorrow at 3,000 feet. Our turbulence looks like this. We'll have those isolated thunderstorms possible near Chilkoot and White, and just a couple small pockets with those northwest winds coming out of the bays and passes below 4,000 feet. A small area of light to isolated moderate 4,000 to 6,000 feet over the Aleutians, and our area of low pressure will bring us light to isolated moderate below 4,000 feet along the Brooks Range. Stay tuned. We're right back with your marine forecast.
When a wildfire breaks out, an incident meteorologist crunches data to come up with the forecasts that will be used to answer some pressing questions. Where can the fire crews safely position themselves? And how long can they be in place?
You'll see a forecast for the general public that seems like a really nice day.
Light winds to start the day out of the south, but the winds will pick up and even change direction as the frontal boundary moves on through.
It seems like a great day, like, you know, let's go to the beach, but your fire could be burning in one direction at 1 minute, and as soon as that front passes, you got the fire burning in another direction.
Predicting fire weather can be a tricky business, and it requires a lot of training. Each year, all the incident meteorologists gather for a week at the National Interagency Fire Center in Boise, Idaho. It's a chance to compare notes, for the new IMETs to learn from the veterans, and for everyone to practice with some key fire weather equipment, like the pie ball.
A pie ball is a pilot balloon. Pilot balloon. That's how they call it, yeah.
The pie ball is a helium-filled balloon that's launched to track the winds up in the atmosphere.
Winds are pretty much the most important thing to be concerned about on fires. And when we're out on fires, we launch these a couple times during the day, you know, once in the morning at least and in the afternoon.
Using an instrument called a theodolite, IMETs measure the angle of the path that the balloon takes.
62 degrees.
Then they calculate the wind's speed and direction.
As it goes up, we see where the stronger winds are, where the light winds are. Ready?
Launch.
On a fire, although the IMET is the only weather specialist on the scene, he or she is not working alone.
It's not just the incident meteorologist that's out there on a forest fire, it's the entire National Weather Service.
As firefighters rely on the IMETs in the field, the IMETs rely on their counterparts at National Weather Service forecast offices around the country. The local forecast offices keep in contact with the IMETs on fires in their specific regions. Forecast office meteorologists watch for threatening signs like increasing winds, high temperatures, or very low humidities. And when they see trouble, they issue a so-called red flag warning. That lets the fire teams know to expect explosive fire growth. Backing up the local forecast offices, there are meteorologists tracking fire weather on a national scale.
This is the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma.
Meteorologists at the Storm Prediction Center give national firefighting agencies advanced warning of where fires are likely to get started. so the agencies can determine where in the country firefighters will be needed most.
This map is showing fire danger ratings on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 correlates to an extreme fire danger.
The biggest priority here during the fire season is to be on the lookout for those great fire starters in the sky. Dry thunderstorms.
All it takes is one lightning strike to ignite a fire. In the west, quite commonly, there's a deep, dry layer of air beneath the thunderstorm, and so a lot of the rain that does occur with those thunderstorms evaporates before it gets to the ground.
The answer? Cloud-to-ground lightning detectors. These devices can pick up magnetic waves from lightning within a 100-mile radius. Using these readings, forecasters at the Storm Prediction Center can track a storm almost strike by strike. Their reports are posted on the web and can be instantly accessed by anyone, even an incident meteorologist at a fire in the middle of nowhere.
We have a little satellite dish that we take and set up in our laptop computer. We also have model equations that we can look at, the mathematical interpretations of what the atmosphere might be doing.
Without this equipment, we'd be in a pickle out there in the field.
In fact, sometimes the most important piece of firefighting equipment at the scene of a fire isn't an axe or a helicopter. It's the satellite dish, bringing weather information to the IMET. IMET Jim Wallman can tell you that. When he was dispatched to the Pine Fire near Lebec, California in 2004, his satellite data and forecasts soon became the focal point of the firefighting operation.
When I had arrived, the fire had pretty much consumed most of the hillside and had threatened quite a few homes.
To tame the fire, firefighters wanted to set a burnout, a deliberate fire that would burn the vegetation above the main fire before it turned that way. They needed to know from Jim when the wind conditions were just right to light it. It was a tense moment. If the burnout was lit at the wrong time, the fire could have raged out of control.
If the wind came in the opposite direction and you lit the fire, then it would have actually made the situation that much worse.
When he was confident, Jim gave the go-ahead forecast, and the fire crew went ahead with the burnout. Thankfully, the forecast was accurate, and the burnout was a complete success.
It was a big relief, a lot of smiles.
What could have been a major tragedy had been averted.
And welcome back for your marine forecast. Hope you enjoyed that segment. Taking a look at our sea surface temperatures, and while we look at this, I want to mention the Matanuska River. We also have a special weather statement out for the Matanuska River. It's already here in early June, has reached its midsummer levels, and so we do expect high flow volumes in these warmer temperatures, high snow melt, high glacier melt, and so with that, we do expect high volumes of the Matanuska River through the next several days until we see some cooler temperatures move in for the weekend. So taking a look now at our sea ice. We did have our analysis this afternoon, and they wanted us to mention that with that, the coastal ice is becoming more and more marginal, and with that, anyone that is traveling out on that ice should be aware that it could break off and drift away really at any time as it continues to dissipate under these warm conditions. Taking a look at our southeast winds and waves now, you can see up near Lynn Canal, north winds out of the at 20 knots and seas about 4 feet. A little bit more confused northwest and southeast winds here for the southern portions of the inner passageways, and seas about 2 to 3 feet. Northwest winds out over the open waters, 15 to 20 knots, and seas between 5 and 8 feet out there. And then fairly light winds continue for Thursday with the high pressure starting to take shape. South to southeast winds 15 knots for the southern portions there near Dixon Entrance, and north winds 15 knots with seas about 3 feet throughout. Out over the open waters, northwest all the way down until you get to the southern portion of the Gulf where it's southeast and seas between 5 and 7 feet. Now for Wednesday for South Central, again, those higher gusts coming out of the northern bays and passes, so Prince William Sound, be aware of those if you're traveling on the marine waters out there. Be aware that there could be some gusty winds through those parts. North winds throughout much of Cook Inlet and down towards the Barren Islands, all generally between 10 and 15 knots. Westerly winds near south of Kodiak coming out of Shelikof at about 20 knots, and seas anywhere between 3 and 6 feet. On into South Central for Thursday now. Variable winds as high pressure takes control for much of the interior portions of the waters, 10 knots, and seas are going to be between 2 and 3 feet. Out over the open waters, expect northwest to southwest winds, 15 to 20 knots, and seas between 4 and 6 feet. Fairly light flow out over the Alaska Peninsula, northwest and west here towards Pilot Point and Chignik, and seas are going to be between about 1 and 6 feet. And then on into Thursday, seeing a little bit more flow around that next frontal system in southeast to east winds, 15 to 25 knots, and seas 6 to 7 feet south of the peninsula, 2 feet north of it. On out to the Aleutians now, we see generally in southwest to westerly flow anywhere between 15 and 25 knots, and seas generally between 6 and 9 feet. And then for Thursday, expect a little bit more northwest to westerly winds starting to take shape, and seas 15 to 25 knots, or excuse me, winds 15 to 25 knots, seas between 3 and 7 feet. For the west coast, expect either easterly winds right off the peninsula there, or southerly winds down towards the Pribilof Islands, and the winds are going to be between 15 and 20 knots, and seas 2 to 8 feet. And then easterly winds or variable winds, 10 knots, 2 to 4 foot seas on Thursday. Up towards the Arctic coast, we have easterly flow for the northeastern portion, southeasterly flow for the northeasterly portion, and then becoming northerly for the northwest portion of the state. Seas generally between 4 to 5 feet and winds 10 to 20 knots. And then still northerly winds for the northeastern portion of the state, 10 to 15 knots, and 2 to 3 foot seas, becoming easterly winds at about 5 to 20 knots, and seas are going to be on the order of about 2 feet up there, with still some ice keeping the waves out of those areas. So again, recapping our weather, we have our front that's starting to fall apart as we go into the overnight period, our developing area of low pressure out over the northern portion of the state, and with that we do expect some rain, possibility of some snow, and dry conditions remain in charge over the southern portion of the state with some fog pushing into Bristol Bay. For Wednesday, expect warm and dry conditions across much of the southern portion of the state. Isolated thunderstorms here for the northern portions of southeast Alaska with just some patchy cloud cover for the rest of southeast Alaska. And this area of lower pressure moves quickly off to the east. And then for Thursday, one more day of dry and warm conditions with isolated showers developing along the Alaska Range. Thanks for joining us this evening. Have a great night.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.